Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and everyone listening today, I want to talk to you about something that affects every single one of us, whether we like it or not. It's not about money, it's not about status, it's not about how smart you are or how many degrees you've earned. It's about emotional maturity, because no matter how brilliant you are, no matter how wealthy, no matter how skilled, if you lack emotional maturity, life has a way of reminding you that there are gaps you cannot cover up with titles, paychecks, or charm. And what's most fascinating, and at the same time most frustrating, is that emotional immaturity doesn't announce itself with a billboard or a red flag. It sneaks in quietly, it hides in everyday behavior, it shows itself in conversations, in reactions, in relationships, in how we handle stress. So tonight, I want to walk you through the top 3 signs of emotional immaturity, not because I want to point fingers or shame anyone, but because we all have blind spots, and maybe, just maybe, by looking at these signs together, you'll see something in yourself or in someone close to you that sparks growth. The first sign I want to bring to your attention is the inability to take responsibility. Now, think about this for a moment. Taking responsibility is not just about saying, "my fault," when you break a glass. It's about owning your role in conflicts, in mistakes, in the outcomes of your life. An emotionally immature person has an almost allergic reaction to responsibility. They are masters of blame shifting. If the project failed, it's because the boss gave unclear directions. If the relationship ended, it's because the other person didn't understand them. If they're broke, it's because the economy is bad, the government is corrupt, their parents didn't provide enough. Always someone else's fault. And what does that do? It creates a cycle where growth becomes impossible. Because how can you improve what you refuse to acknowledge? You can't fix what you won't face. Imagine 2 people in an argument. One says, "You know what? I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I lost my temper." The other replies, "Well, you made me mad, so of course I yelled." Who sounds more mature, who actually has a chance at improving? The one who owns their part. Emotional immaturity locks a person in a cage of excuses, and that cage gets smaller with time. But there's something even deeper here. Refusing responsibility is not just laziness, it's fear. It's fear of looking weak, fear of being wrong, fear of losing control, and ironically, by refusing responsibility, they lose control over their own growth. I've seen this in workplaces where someone spends more time defending their mistake than it would have taken to simply fix it. I've seen it in families where parents refuse to admit their shortcomings and end up pushing their children away. And I've seen it in friendships that crumble because one person always feels like they are the victim. Emotional maturity requires courage. It requires the ability to say, "Yes, that one's on me. I dropped the ball. I could have done better." And the more you do that, the more respect you earn. But emotional immaturity, it's like running from your own shadow. You waste energy, you make yourself look ridiculous, and in the end, the shadow is still there. The second sign is poor emotional regulation. This one is huge. When someone is emotionally immature, their emotions control them instead of the other way around. They get angry and suddenly they're shouting, throwing insults, maybe even throwing objects. They get disappointed, and instead of communicating, they sulk, they give the silent treatment, they lash out. They get jealous and they start accusing, controlling, or manipulating. It's as if their feelings are the driver of the car, and their logic, their wisdom, their self-control are all locked in the trunk. And what's sad is that sometimes these individuals don't even realize how destructive it is. They think, well, that's just how I am, I'm passionate, I'm emotional. But passion is not an excuse for cruelty. Passion is not an excuse for recklessness. Emotional regulation doesn't mean you don't feel deeply. It means you feel deeply, but you respond wisely. Think about a child who doesn't get the toy they want in the store. They scream, they cry, they throw themselves on the ground. We tolerate it because they're children, because their brains are still developing, because they literally haven't learned control yet. But when that same behavior shows up in a 30-year-old, a 40-year-old, a leader, a spouse, a colleague, suddenly it's no longer cute. It's destructive. Emotional immaturity in this form destroys trust. Nobody wants to walk on eggshells around a person who could explode at any moment. Nobody wants to guess, what mood are they in today? People crave stability. Emotional immaturity robs relationships of that stability, and let's not forget the other side of poor regulation, the shutting down. Some people don't explode outwardly, instead they implode, they disappear. They ghost, they avoid, they refuse to speak about their feelings because they don't know how. That too is emotional immaturity, because instead of saying, "I'm hurt," they vanish. Instead of saying, "I'm overwhelmed," they retreat into silence. And silence, as comforting as it may feel in the short term, is poison in relationships. Healthy relationships require conversation, even when it's uncomfortable, but immaturity avoids discomfort at all costs. Now, this sign is one of the most dangerous because it spreads. Emotional dysregulation in one person can trigger it in another. One person yells, the other yells back. One person shuts down, the other becomes more distant. Before you know it, the entire relationship is run by emotions instead of reason, respect, or love. That's why, if you recognize this pattern in yourself, you need to pause and relearn, because maturity doesn't come from age, it comes from practice. The third sign, and this one ties the other two together, is a lack of empathy. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, to step outside of your own perspective, and for just a moment, to see life from theirs. An emotionally immature person struggles deeply with this. Their world, is locked around themselves, their needs, their wants, their struggles. They don't listen to understand, they listen to reply, or worse, they listen to dismiss. They cut you off mid-sentence, they belittle your concerns, they make everything a competition of who has it worse. If you say, "I had a really rough day," they reply, "Well, you think your day was rough, let me tell you about mine." If you say, "That hurt me," they say, "You're too sensitive." It's a constant invalidation of others because in their mind, only their feelings count, and this lack of empathy is what makes them terrible in conflict resolution, because to resolve a conflict, you need to understand both sides. You need to at least try to see the other perspective, but if you lack empathy, you can't even get there. It's always about you, your pain, your inconvenience. That's why so many arguments with emotionally immature people feel like hitting a brick wall. You can't get through because they aren't listening, they're just defending, and what does that do to a relationship? It starves it. Every healthy relationship, whether between friends, partners, parents and children, or colleagues, requires empathy. It's the oxygen of human connection. Without it, everything suffocates. Now, let's connect the dots. When you refuse responsibility, you push blame outward. When you can't regulate emotions, you push chaos outward. And when you lack empathy, you shut others out. These three signs together create a perfect storm. A person stuck in this cycle will live in constant conflict, constant dissatisfaction, constant loneliness, even if they are surrounded by people. Because nobody wants to feel blamed all the time. Nobody wants to feel unsafe around explosive emotions. Nobody wants to feel dismissed and unheard. That's why emotional immaturity is not just a personal weakness. It's a relational virus. It spreads, it damages, it isolates. But the hopeful part of this conversation is that maturity is not fixed. It's not genetic. It's not something you're either born with or not. It's a skill, and like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and improved. The problem is, most people don't want to put in that effort because it requires self-reflection, humility, and consistency. It requires looking in the mirror and saying, maybe I am the problem, maybe I do overreact, maybe I don't listen enough. And for someone immature, that kind of honesty feels like an attack. But for someone striving for growth, it feels like liberation, because once you see the problem, you can change it. You can train yourself to take responsibility by practicing phrases like, "You're right, I messed up there." You can train emotional regulation by learning to pause, to breathe, to step away before reacting. You can build empathy by practicing listening, by asking yourself, how would I feel in their shoes? It's not about perfection, it's about progress. So, when we talk about the top 3 signs of emotional immaturity, we're not labeling people to shame them. We're shining a light so that growth becomes possible. And growth, after all, is the real sign of maturity. The willingness to see your flaws, the courage to work on them, and the patience to keep going even when it's uncomfortable. So where does all of this leave us? We've walked through the inability to take responsibility, the struggle with emotional regulation, and the lack of empathy, 3 signs that seem so small when you list them out, but when they show up in your everyday life, they carry the weight of wrecking balls. And here's the truth, the hard truth. We all carry pieces of these inside us, every one of us, some more than others, some hide it better, some have learned to mask it in polished words or polite smiles. But the signs are there. They come out when we're tired, when we're stressed, when someone pushes our buttons. That's when the real test of maturity shows up. It's easy to look composed when life is smooth. It's easy to take responsibility when the stakes are low. It's easy to offer empathy when it doesn't cost you anything. The challenge is when you're cornered, when you're frustrated, when admitting fault feels like swallowing broken glass, when listening to someone else feels like silencing your own pain. That's where the truth of who you are shows up. And if you're honest with yourself right now, you've had those moments. You've blamed someone else when deep down you knew you contributed. You've lashed out in anger and justified it with, well, they deserved it. You've dismissed someone's feelings because you didn't want to deal with them. And you know what? That doesn't make you a monster, that makes you human, but the difference between immaturity and maturity is what happens next. Do you stay there? Do you build a home in that place of blame, chaos, and selfishness? Or do you step back, admit it, and do better next time? See, the problem with emotional immaturity isn't that people have flaws. We all do. The problem is when someone refuses to grow past them. That refusal locks them in a cycle. A cycle of broken relationships, missed opportunities, constant conflicts, and shallow connections. And if you've ever been close to someone like that, you know how exhausting it is. You know how it drains you to keep forgiving, to keep excusing, to keep hoping they'll change. And if you've ever been that person yourself, you know how lonely it feels, even if you can't admit it out loud. Here's the thing about maturity. It's not glamorous. It doesn't get you applause. Nobody claps for you when you pause instead of exploding. Nobody cheers when you say, that one's my fault. Nobody throws a parade when you sit quietly and listen instead of talking over someone. But those are the things that build respect. Those are the things that make people want to stay in your life. Those are the things that create trust, safety, and connection. I want you to picture this. Imagine 2 versions of yourself. One version keeps dodging responsibility, keeps letting emotions control the wheel, keeps ignoring the feelings of others. That version gets older, but not wiser. That version keeps repeating the same arguments in different rooms with different people, but the script never changes. Life keeps feeling harder, colder, lonelier. And then there's the other version, the version that stumbles, admits it, learns, the version that feels the anger rise up, takes a breath, and says, I'll respond when I'm calmer, the version that pauses in the middle of a conversation and thinks, maybe I should listen more before I react. That version doesn't have a perfect life, but they have better relationships, stronger connections, more peace. Which version do you want to be? Because maturity isn't about what age you are. It's about what version of yourself you're building. And that's the part that a lot of people miss. They think growth is automatic. They think if they just get older, they'll get wiser. But look around. We all know people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, still throwing tantrums, still pointing fingers, still making everything about themselves. Age doesn't guarantee maturity. Choice does, practice does, humility does. So ask yourself, where in your life are you dodging responsibility right now? Where are you saying, it's not my fault, when maybe part of it is? Where are you letting your emotions drag you around like a rag doll, instead of sitting in the driver's seat? Where are you ignoring the feelings of others because it's easier to focus on your own? Those aren't comfortable questions. But they're necessary ones, because until you see the problem, you can't solve it. Here's the good news, though. Maturity compounds. One small act of maturity today builds trust that carries into tomorrow. One moment of self-control strengthens the muscle for the next time. One act of empathy opens the door to deeper connection. You don't need to fix everything overnight. You don't need to become a saint by next week. You just need to choose differently, consistently, even in small ways, and slowly the people around you will notice. They'll feel safer with you, they'll respect you more, they'll trust you, and you'll start noticing it too. You'll feel more grounded, less reactive, more in control of yourself. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, but what if the people around me are the ones who are immature? What if they're the ones refusing responsibility, blowing up at everything, ignoring my feelings? And that's a fair point. You can't change them, you can only change you, but here's the reality: your maturity can expose their immaturity. When you stop playing the blame game, they're left holding their excuses alone. When you stop feeding the fire of emotional chaos, their explosions lose power. When you show empathy, even when they don't deserve it, you show a higher standard, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes that challenges them to grow too, and if it doesn't, then your maturity at least protects your peace. At the end of the day, emotional maturity is not about being perfect. It's about being accountable, being stable, being compassionate. And those three things together change the way people experience you. Think about the people you admire most, not the celebrities, not the flashy personalities, but the people you actually trust in your life. Chances are, they own their mistakes, they stay calm under pressure, and they care about others. That's maturity. That's what makes them safe to be around. That's what makes them leaders, friends, partners you can rely on. So here's the challenge. Stop waiting for life to force you into maturity. Stop waiting for another failed relationship, another lost job, another broken friendship to be the wake-up call. Choose it now. Choose to grow before you're cornered. Choose to practice responsibility before you're called out. Choose to practice self-control before you explode. Choose empathy before someone has to beg you to care, because the truth is, we don't rise to the level of our intentions, we fall to the level of our habits. And if immaturity is your habit, you'll keep falling, but if maturity becomes your habit, you'll keep rising. You want better relationships, grow your maturity. You want more respect, grow your maturity. You want peace of mind, grow your maturity. It all starts with you. Not with your boss, not with your partner, not with your parents, with you. And the question you need to ask yourself is simple. Am I willing to do the uncomfortable work of growing up emotionally, or am I going to stay stuck blaming everyone else? One choice keeps you in the same cycle. The other choice sets you free.